Mona?
Here.
Okay. Richard?
Here.
Judy?
Here.
Gabrielle? Okay, we don't have Gabrielle yet. Joan? Joan there?
She was.
There's Mona. I see Mona.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. All right, so we don't have Joan.
Joan, it just says she joined. Joan?
I hear her. We don't see Joan.
Okay, good morning, Joan.
Hi,
Jackie,
good morning.
I saw.
Here.
Beverly, I saw.
Yes, I'm here.
Deidre,
Yep.
Sally, and Sally.
Here.
Sally Haas.
Here.
Sally Singer.
I don't see Sally Singer.
All right, so
Sally Singer. Yeah, what about Sally Singer?
did Gabrielle come on? All right, so even without Gabrielle and Sally Singer, we have 10.
I'm here actually. Sally Singer's here. My iPad is in distress, so I'm on my phone.
Okay, good enough.
But I am here.
Okay.
So Gabrielle is the only one missing?
I think that's right.
We have a quorum.
Okay.
We can get started.
Okay, so can I ask everybody to mute their microphone?
Yep.
Keep barking dogs and other distractions at bay. Everybody ready?
Yes.
Okay, and so first I just want to welcome everyone to our second virtual board meeting. And thank you all for calling in or being here on WebEx. It's awkward, but you know what? It's better than nothing. So anyway, I'm glad that everyone can participate and that I can see everybody. That's sort of fun. We have a very big agenda today, and you have that before you, I'm sure. A number of action items. We have elections and also a couple of reports. So without further ado, there has been no, by the way, written request for a public session, so we're not going to have that. And instead, I will turn this meeting over to Joyce for the president's report.
Thank you very much. So welcome to everyone. I'm glad we can do this. As Liz said, we're getting really good at it, I think. And I hope everyone is well. I hope your families are well. And at this unprecedented time, usually campus life starts to wind down, but that is not the case this year. We are all still reeling, really, from the recent spate of murders of Black men and women and the powerful resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement across the country. Here at FIT, the level of rage, really, and the desire for engagement is unprecedented. And we are working to address it. And we'll talk a bit about that in a few minutes. At this moment, we are remaining in limbo, I'm afraid, regarding the fall semester. As you know, we are subject to state, city, and SUNY regulations as to how we can proceed. And so we are simultaneously planning for a variety of possibilities until such time as we get direction as to where SUNY, the direction that SUNY is going to take. So the things we're looking at is the possibility of a hybrid opening in which students work both remotely and in person. There are many, many variations of how that could work. We could be totally remote again, as we were in the spring, which no one is hoping will be the end result. And then there's the possibility of being totally on campus, which is probably extremely unrealistic at this point. So we've started developing algorithms for each of the scenarios, and we started that a while ago. And so we're developing manuals, really, and sequential lists of things for each scenario so that once a decision is made, we can immediately go into implementation. The space planners on our staff have mapped out the entire campus in terms of social distancing. So of course, the result is that the average classroom will only be able to accommodate half the number of students that it normally would be able to accommodate. We're particularly concerned about our art and design students. They were very challenged in the spring semester. They managed to complete the semester, but they did not have the tools that they needed and the materials, and they needed to be in the labs and the studios. They did an amazing job in spite of it, but there's a lot of concern about what the status is going to be in terms of their ability to have the hands-on experience that they really do need next semester. So there are endless things to be resolved. How do we safely move people around the campus? If only 2 people can get on an elevator at a time, how is that possible for people to make schedules? How can we control distancing on escalators? And then there's, the student dining hall, and there's the use of the restrooms. We're analyzing residence hall capacity as well as the financial impact if we don't fill enough of the rooms in order to break even for running the dorms. We're analyzing staff and faculty needs. How many people are, must be on campus? How do we keep the work flowing and how do we decide who has to travel in and who doesn't? We have to, of course, address incredible technology needs. We are offering enhanced training programs in remote teaching for faculty during the summer because we did what we did in 2 weeks and, continued to train and to help people along the way. But of course, there will be more and different classes for the fall. So we are putting in place more training, more intensive training now. We're looking at PPEs, we're looking at testing, sanitation. So whatever option we choose, we are most cognizant, of course, of keeping everyone safe and taking into consideration all of the things that people undoubtedly will present that will be very personal to their case as to whether they can, in fact, take public transportation and come to work and work in an environment where there are other people. So 3 weeks ago, to the day, actually, we were scheduled to hold commencement ceremonies at Radio City Music Hall. Obviously, we could not do that. That was extremely disappointing for the students, needless to say. And, we were all disappointed. So what we did instead was we held a week of virtual congratulatory celebrations. There were heartfelt tributes on video from faculty and staff, from some of the students. The valedictorians gave, at least made limited presentations during the virtual event. We did all sorts of things all week, dancing with our mascot tiger and all sorts of activities. And then finally, we had Pomp and Circumstance playing in the background, and we rolled out the names of all of the graduates on commencement day itself. The students are very anxious for us the graduating class of 2020 is very anxious for us to hold an in-person commencement in the fall. We're trying very hard to make that happen. A lot is going to depend upon whether or not the city and state policies allow us to do it. And also really being able to get and hold on to an external space because there's hundreds of organizations all scrambling around for the same thing. But at any rate, we've made a commitment to try and do it for the students and hopefully we'll be able to. In the fall, we are planning to present the garments that were selected for this year's Future of Fashion runway show, which of course could not take place. So we're having a virtual exhibition and film. At this moment, they reside in a virtual gallery. I'm really happy to say that this has garnered some media coverage because it's unique, and hopefully it's all going to go well. So as of the beginning of June, 22 of our students, and they represented 7 different countries actually, have been featured in the press, including Vogue and Women's Wear and Fashionista, among others, with their designs. In a related piece of good news, 6 fashion design students, including 2 from our MFA program, have been selected for CFDA scholarships. They're finalists, I should say, I'm sorry, scholarship finalists. The winners are going to be chosen in the next few weeks, but it's extremely selective and it's very competitive. So we're really, really proud of these students to have come this far. So I turn now to our action items, in particular our budget and tuition rates. We are asking you to approve an operating budget for fiscal 2021 of slightly over $219 million. With your approval, we wish to increase tuition for New York State resident undergraduates by $50 a semester or $100 a year. And for non-residents, of course, it's a multiple of 3, so it's $150 per semester. There will be no increase in our graduate school rates. I think we've discussed this in the past. We need to even up with what's happening elsewhere throughout SUNY. And we've chosen not to raise student fees this year. So Sherry Brabham, of course, is going to present a detailed analysis of the numbers in a few minutes, but I'd like to provide a little bit of context. You may recall that I discussed that SUNY had asked us to prepare budgets based on 3 scenarios: best case, bad case, and worst case. So what we have chosen to present today is the middle scenario, which is the bad case, or most likely case, or what we think will happen. And it assumes a 5% decline in enrollment and a 10% decrease in state aid and related losses in city and chargeback funding. So I should stress that none of this is cast in stone. Anything can happen. We continue to work in an environment of uncertainty. We know that there will be reductions in public funding, in our public funding, and it could be worse than we're assuming. So there could be dramatic changes ahead, and we may indeed have to revisit this budget after the start of the new fiscal year. So while we are assuming a 5% decline in the overall enrollment with a continuing decline in our non-degree seeking students that are contributing to that statistic, I point out that SUNY is projecting an overall drop in enrollment throughout the system of over 16%, and the technical college's expected decline of 23%. So while I don't want to celebrate a 5% decline, just in terms of what is happening overall, we're in a better position than most. It's also interesting to note, and hopefully it will all come to fruition. We have 58 graduating associate degree students in South Korea, and 41 of them are planning to attend FIT in New York in the fall. So that will be nice, and we're going to just hope that the travel and all the rest that's in the balance can be worked out. As you know, many of our students are suffering from financial hardships, which have only been exacerbated by the prolonged impact of the pandemic. I'm very pleased to tell you that we've raised over $50,000 for our Student Emergency Fund, and that made us eligible for a $50,000 match from SUNY. Many of you donated, and I thank you for that. It's going to make a tremendous difference for the students. Many of them work, as you know, sometimes they work full time, sometimes they are self-supporting, sometimes they have families to support. And the pandemic really did wipe away their ability, their jobs. I mean, the employment status for many of them, of course, has been reduced to nothing. Nevertheless, these students are incredibly motivated and determined, so the grants from the Student Emergency Fund are going to go a long way. At the same time, we applied for and received over $3.5 million from the Federal CARES Act program, which is meant for college students. So those funds will be distributed to the neediest students. There are well over 2,000 of them that are in the category, and the grants will probably range anywhere from $1,300 to $1,500. The feds dictate what the parameters are by which the eligibility is determined. And for the students will have to have submitted financial aid form. It's called a FAFSA form. We'll have to have that on file from the fall in order to be considered. So these funds, just like those from the emergency fund, are not meant for tuition because there's other sources of loans and grants from the state for tuition, but rather for such things as food and medical care and travel to campus and course materials and all those other kinds of things that are necessary to be able to keep functioning. I'm very happy to report that we continue to do well in our grants for academic research. We've raised over $660,000 in this fiscal year for research. Jackie Lividini introduced us to people at the Hearst Foundation, and so we applied, we competed for, and actually received a grant of $144,000 from Hearst, which is amazing because it's really a very tough process. And the grant supports one of our growing efforts in the field that blends science and design. It's really where we're trying to distinguish ourselves. And this grant will help in the creation of a garment that personalizes and monitors treatment for women with breast cancer. As you may recall, we wanted to honor Pete Scotese for his 100th birthday by establishing a prize in his name as part of our innovation fund. So we have raised $120,000 so far. Most of that really is from Pete's longtime colleague and admirer, Ed Goodman. And so we're continuing to work on it, and Pete is just amazing. I mean, he continues to have ideas about innovation and really enjoys seeing us move into that arena. So, of course, the evacuation of the campus in March put on hold a number of initiatives that we were planning to implement in regard to, well, in response to the whole issue of racism and the things that were raised in the spring. But the murder of George Floyd has, in fact, ignited the community, the students, the faculty and staff, and the fact that the school year is over and that everyone is scattered, still evacuated, really does seem irrelevant. I mean, everyone is coalescing around the issues. And one thing that we hear over and over is that people want an opportunity to talk about their own experiences, to express their grief and their pain, and really to be able to do that in a non-judgmental environment. So, you know, the people, they want to see action in ways that are meaningful and that are effective. So we're going to embark on a number of initiatives. We're going to start a series of virtual discussions with students and faculty and staff to reflect, to question, to express themselves, and to really empower them to identify ways to find substantial and sustainable change. I think there'll be moments of difficult conversation, but I think they'll be important. I think there's an impatience out there in the world that you see in the protests, and no one wants to hear what we can't do. They want to talk about what we can do. So we will listen, and we will put as many things on the table to move forward or to explore as we possibly can. We're developing a scholarship in the name of George Floyd that will be used to recruit and support more minority students who otherwise would not be able to afford to attend FIT. We've been working through the foundation on developing a social impact collaborative with a special emphasis on social justice. I think that will become a vehicle really to expand our reach, to be able to have an external advisory group, people who really have devoted their careers to dealing with these issues, who probably have insights that we wouldn't necessarily have on our own. We can have forums and discussions and hopefully elevate the dialogue to being directed toward important and objective achievements. So we're going to be welcoming suggestions from the community. That means all of us, on topics and experts who can add meaningfully to the national conversation. I've had the opportunity to talk to a few people, actually. Robin Burns had some contacts that she was kind enough to put me in touch with, and we've had some conversations that I think can be meaningful and insightful about things we can do going forward. So obviously, this is going to be an ongoing focus, and I will report back, and I will welcome suggestions. Finally, we will mount a major voter registration drive. I know that hopefully, I should say, our young folks are not going to be cynical about voting. Voting is going to really be essential, and it's probably the most powerful tool they have to voice their concerns and their claims as citizens. So not long ago, I mean, every year we do voter registration, and not long ago, students registered a record number of voters here on campus. So I am really optimistic that we'll be able to have even better results now in this environment. So I suppose this is the summer, no matter where the members of the community are located. I think vacations are going to take a backseat as everyone continues to work together really to make change happen. So I will end there. I don't know if there's any questions about any of the things we're doing, thinking about, but I will keep you posted, and hopefully we will make progress on these many fronts.
Joyce, I'm sorry, can I just ask one question? You mentioned this budget, and I know we've talked about this before, includes a 10% cut in state aid. Have you received any guidance at all from the state in terms of whether that's realistic or not?
No, we don't know. And I really think that I believe the reason we have not heard is because I think the state is waiting to see what's going to come out of Washington in terms of aid to the states. Once they know what their budgets are, they will know how they can function at the state and aid to localities. That's my assumption, Liz.
Okay.
I would like to say something. I know we have to get to the budget, but first I'd like to commend, really thank you, Joyce, for the very powerful and heartfelt message that you sent to the entire FIT community on the two pandemics that we are really facing at this time. It was an important message. It was action oriented, and I know that for you personally, as an African American, that it had to be, this entire experience has to be quite painful, as it really is for all of us. But most importantly, I think that it conveyed a message that FIT stands in solidarity, not only with the students, but at least according to the polls, with the majority of Americans, and looks like the world. in
It's
in-
the moment, it looks like.
on the issues of inclusion and equality and most pointedly against brutality and violence against Black people. Lastly, I just want to also commend you on two specific action items, the social impact collaborative that I know we discussed a time back in one of the board meetings, and I would personally love to get engage in this. Something that I think that is really critically important at this time, and I think I can help. But also, the voter registration campaign could not be more important in this moment, where people really need to, exercise their civic responsibility. We're always challenged by young people doing this, but this is an opportunity for FIT to get on the front lines on this issue where in a time, and this is editorializing, I know, but especially at a time when there's so many efforts in our country to suppress the vote, which goes against everything we should all stand for. So I won't go, I could go on, as you know, on these topics, but I won't. I just want to really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for taking such a strong stand.
Well, thank you, Judy. And yes, I do think you can be helpful. It's my thought to talk to you more about the Social Impact Collaborative. So great, thank you very much.
If I can just add to what Judy said. First of all, Judy was absolutely right. It was an articulate, heartfelt message, one that we could all be very proud of. But I think, one of the things that people are looking to do is actually take action as opposed to simply just talking. Right. And I wondered whether we might not find ways to reach out to funders who might be interested in funding scholarships for students of minorities. I was just saying people of color generally, because of the way the law works, but making available to lots of young people who simply would not have the resources to come to FIT, the chance to actually do so. I know one group of one alumna took the initiative recently to set up a fund in the jewelry department. In the space of a weekend, raised $50,000 to do that.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it made me think that she had put together a coalition of other young jewelers to fund this, but it seemed to me that there were other opportunities to reach out to people and say, hey, it's time to do some action. Can you help out here?
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. I mean, that's part of what we've been looking at, and we're hoping that we can even get some corporate sponsors who, everyone is looking for ways to demonstrate that they're in sync with the movement across the country and they want to stand up and be counted. I think this is an excellent way, an excellent vehicle for them to be a sponsor of the scholarships that will in fact help to diversify the student body. So any ideas you have would be welcome. We've been making lists of people that we're going to start reaching out to immediately. So yes, I think you're 100% right.
Joyce, can you be the leader? The protocol is when someone raises their hand, you call on them and then people don't talk over each other.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it me or I can't see everyone is the problem. So
Joan has her hand up.
I can't see.
Beverly and Mona all have their hands up.
I can't see them. Okay, so how should we do this? Who can see everyone? Stephen, can you, or Liz, can you?
Beverly, you're muted if you're trying to speak.
Yeah, Joyce, hit your upper right corner button, gallery, and you'll get it.
See, I'm on an iPad and I don't have what it.
I am as well, Joyce. Do you see the?
No, the upper right. Judy,
I just see it now.
Judy, hit your upper right corner button and you'll get gallery. You'll get everybody.
Right. I'm on an iPad as well, Joyce.
Yeah, I just got it. but I get 9 at a time. Okay.
You don't get everybody. Yeah.
I've got everybody, but let me just add, Joyce, I think you did a great job in how you opened the letter and actually brought together the time from the 60s to the time now, how you spelled out exactly what this country, the world, is going through. And so it was a poignant letter. Let me also add that there are, since we are a creative school, I believe that coming up with creative designs, as Richard's friend mentioned, would be great, and allowing the students to get involved with something in the name of George Floyd, I think would be great. And I'm sure Sally might have comments to that as well, since she's over the student body. And then the other thing is that we might want to include some type of corporate training from the top down on covert and overt discrimination, and exactly how that impacts our relationship, our ability to be on equal footing, our options to make a contribution. So, you know, that's just throwing out some really good, challenging, actionable ideas, and I would love to be involved in that.
Okay, one of the things that that we actually made a commitment to do last spring, when we had our conversations with the students and with faculty, was to put in place mandatory training, if you will, on unconscious bias and other kinds of elements that would contribute to discriminatory behavior. So that we are teed up to make that part of mandatory training for new hires. Of course, you do understand that for some of these things, we need to have the union agreement, but we did meet with them. They said all the right things. And what, of course, happened was we all dispersed in March, but we will come back to that. That has been discussed, and it is my belief, expectation, and intention that that will be put in place.
Okay. What about the existing hires?
Yeah.
And the foundation, possibly?
Yeah, well, you know, not so long ago, it became mandatory on sexual harassment, I'm sorry. And so people do indeed have, after the fact of being here, have had to go through that training as well. So my expectation is we can do a similar thing.
That's great.
So I think someone said there was another
hand. I want to make that contribution, so please keep me in mind.
Thank you. Thanks, Beverly.
Did Joan have something she wanted to say?
Thank you. I did, and I wanted to agree with all of the accolades we've given you, Joyce, and I wanted to go to another idea off another topic, which was, is it possible for us potentially to get a street closing, put up a tent and have a graduation outside the way they do in other places? You said we
well,
get a space.
You know, we've explored doing that. First, it's not big enough. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just not big enough for students, for the number of students, and to allow them X number of guests, you know. The other thing is it is extraordinarily expensive. We don't really gain anything by trying to do that. I don't remember off the top of my head what the numbers are, but I was shocked at what it would cost to be able to do that. So the you know, the fallback, of course, would be our auditorium. I mean, the students want to be able to walk across the stage, but we probably have to have 16 ceremonies or something, again, because of size. So we're looking at everything. I mean, we've been talking, of course, to Radio City. They had sent us to, I guess it was the Hulu Theater. It was one of those theaters, you know, in Madison Square Garden. And again, I say part of the problem is, you know, like in political campaigns, you think you've bought the media time and then someone comes and offers more money and so they give it to them and they no longer have the time. I think some of that is going on with these spaces because there's so much interest and traffic and need. So we're just continuing to work on it.
I didn't
Gabrielle?
necessarily, I didn't mean necessarily the FIT street. I mean, like Columbia just uses the lawn, Harvard just uses a lawn. We're closing some streets according to our mayor, right? Could we take a pedestrian street potentially, was my thought.
Oh, I don't know. I guess we could ask if there's a discount for taking a street that has no cars.
I mean, it was just an idea.
Yeah, yeah. No, we've thought about it at some level. I think, you know, we can see if there's a difference, if there's no cars to be redirected. I don't know.
Mona, do you have your hand up?
I do, yes. And also wanted to thank you, Joyce, for your leadership through a multitude of crises.
Thank you, Mona.
But I wanted to add to Richard's point and question, which is, of course, this is an opportunity to gain traction in enabling access to FIT by students, you know, potential students who may not otherwise have access. But I think just as important is focusing in on the opportunities that our existing and future students may have when they leave FIT. And so I was just curious if, and there's so many things to do at the same time right now, but I'm just curious if any proactive conversations are happening right now with companies to talk about working with them, not just in terms of scholarship, but in terms of actually giving them a pipeline of terrific grads from the great and diverse population that we have at FIT to really put meat to some of the things that their CEOs are saying these days.
Well, you know, we have a pretty robust internship program. So we have lots of relationships with companies. And one of the things that has happened, of course, with the pandemic is that all of those internships were cut short.
Exactly.
And even as we talk about the fall, whether or not companies don't really know what exactly their configuration is going to be. So yes, I think we obviously need to go back and reinforce those conversations with companies. I don't know if this is the moment or if once we have a better idea of what people are doing by, you know, in the next month or so, if the talk about there being another spike in the illness, we see if that happens. I just don't think anybody they're so busy focusing on how they're going to do their own day-to-day business. I don't know that they're really focusing on doing things with us. I think what we can do, though, to your point, is use the moment to talk to them about how they can further the things they say they want to be involved in and do, and get them involved in the scholarship as by way of, you know, ongoing conversation, and then, you know, reinforce that with the internships and hopefully hiring.
Right, and I would just add to that to say the obvious, which is as internships and jobs are being canceled in such a time, those that already have privileged access are finding ways to make the best of it. And so however way we can work with these companies that we already have relationships or new companies, the better, because so many of our students don't have that access.
Right. Liz, are you calling on people?
Who else has a hand up? Oh,
Gabrielle has been
Gabrielle,
trying,
excuse me.
and then Jackie. Gabrielle.
Should I go? Hi, everyone. Hi. Thank you, Joyce. I echo everyone's sentiments for your leadership at this time. Makes all the difference.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to mention a program I've been working on. And when you talk about pipeline, I always think, well, we have to reach further back to really build that pipeline and have more students at FIT that represent diversity and high need students to support. And I've been working with the city, helping to coordinate relief efforts the last few months. And there's a program you may already be involved in, but it's going to be scaling up, that I think could be important for the social impact collaborative focused on social justice, which is a college bridge program. So DOE and we will be announcing shortly a grant from Bloomberg to scale this to all graduating seniors from 12th grade at the New York City Public Schools, where they'll be offered college bridge programming, transition supports to enter college. They will receive for this summer and fall a student who will help them through the enrollment process and be a peer counselor to them through next year. So we know that students who graduate high school, 10 to 40% intend to go to college, 10 to 40% never make it to college and have that summer melt. So, you know, I think that that sort of programming where your current students are involved as peer coaches to rising high school students creates a real pipeline, you know, connection with public schools, which in this city are high need by definition. And it could be an interesting program for you. I don't know if you've been involved in it. Its partnership is DOE, CUNY, and CB nonprofit providers do the programming, and Bloomberg's funding it. But it is not just for CUNY, it's for all students. So it might be an opportunity for all schools, sorry, private, public, SUNY, CUNY. So it might be an opportunity to leverage that.
All right. So we can talk more about it. That sounds great. Thanks. Yeah.
Jackie? Am I wrong? Did Jackie want to say something?
Yeah, she's on mute though. Okay.
Yeah, I think Robin was first though.
Robin, I can't see Robin. Where are you, Robin? There. You're on mute, Robin.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, so funny, on my screen it says mute. Obviously, I concur with what everyone said about Joyce's communication, which I thought was profound and powerful and very timely. But I wanted to capitalize a little bit further on what Mona brought up, because, you know, every day you read about companies' efforts towards the challenge going forward with inclusion and diversity and racism. And Estee Lauder, as an example, has announced that they will contribute $10 million in this effort, $5 million now, $5 million later, that they're going to make a concerted effort to have diversity in their upper ranks, which they do not have pretty much. Levi Strauss, also the CEO yesterday, made the same kind of declaration. And I think that you're going to see more and more companies doing that. And so to Mona's point, I think capitalizing on that in a timely way, more to say, congratulations, and we applaud what you're doing and would like to work with you and be a part of that, even though everything you said, Joyce, is true. I mean, all of my interns, which, you know, I'm trying to keep them all on board, but they're working remotely, poor things. And some of them, that's very difficult as an intern, you know, because you don't have but we're just having them on all the Zoom calls and trying to throw things their way, but it's just not easy for people. But I do think we have an opportunity, from what Mona was saying, and right now, that also could cultivate into a longer relationship, perhaps pulling them into the school to be more involved and potential contributors financially for us in the future. So there's a lot of good reasons for us to look at that list, and especially as it's being announced daily, who they are, the companies. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. All right. We should think about how we can make that outreach and connection, and with some really meaningful ideas about how we can be involved with them. So we can talk more, both Mona and Robin.
Joan has her hand up, and Jackie was.
No, it's my turn.
Jackie and then Joan.
My turn. Okay, so just a couple of things. I'll make it brief. Obviously agree with everyone on your letter, Joyce. I thought it was really well done, and we've been working on those letters for many of our clients. So so I have a different kind of appreciation of it, just the way it was crafted. So that's one thing. But the other thing is, I could spend, and I'm sure all of you the same, every hour of my day on some kind of a virtual webinar, right? I've done a few myself. It's every, whether it's Women's Wear Daily or Business of Fashion or the Accessory Council or the CFDA, or everybody's offering, all these virtual webinars, which are amazing and very informative. But in either participating in them by speaking in them or just listening to them, one thing is very clear to me, especially now that we're having this conversation, is that Joyce, you should be on the webinars. And I know we've talked about doing them for FIT on one of our last calls. I think it was the development committee. But I don't know if we are offering you out there, but I think you have a lot to say, especially when it comes to, youth and college students, and how FIT has such a diverse student body. But what happens to that student body once they go out into the fashion industry? And are they getting the opportunities that they should be getting? Because the fashion industry is not as diverse as the FIT student body, and it should be. And I think that, or many other topics like that, would be great for you to be able to speak about.
Mm-hmm. Well, should we talk more about this offline? I mean, I'm like you, sitting in front of the computer, either, with meetings or webinars, or, I can easily do more. And I think I am very concerned, quite frankly, about FIT establishing its voice out there. And I think that's what you're speaking to.
That's exactly what I'm speaking to.
But it's really that that FIT holds a place in this whole landscape, and we need to have a stronger voice and make use of that. So I really do agree with you. And we need to talk about a strategy, how to make that happen.
Yeah, and I actually already offered you up for an opportunity, which I'll talk to you about later.
Oh, good.
I thought it was a great thing. But anyway, the second thing is that, and Robin and I had a conversation yesterday, and it got me thinking last night about, fundraising. And again, many of my clients were struggling to find a charity to give to during this whole Black Lives Matter crisis. And and they didn't know what direction, and our advice always was to give to a charity that has a long established reputation, that you're sure that where your money's going to, just as we would give that advice with any charitable giving. But I think that in order for FIT really to be part of the conversation, and to be able to have a calling card, and to go to Macy's and Saks and all the retailers that we support, or all the brands we support, with students that become their workforce, we have to have an actual program that they can give to. We have to have, whatever that's called, however it's developed, whatever we wrap our arms around that we want it to be. We need to set that up so that when they're giving directly to that program. And I do think that there's money out there to give right now. So it just can't be a general FIT fund. It has to be something.
No. And I think Phil is, as we speak, setting up the things that I outlined in that last communication, where we talked about action plans, for the scholarship, for the social impact. And we can outline the programs that we're going to do under the aegis of the social impact. So I think we're there. We're in the process of setting up even specific ways people can give money to those.
Well, and we have so I think we have such a compelling story to give to tell. You know, it's not like we have to make something up. Anyway,
No, we just
so
need the vehicles that are clear, and that we can do.
Joyce, you might want to mention, there is, maybe we should have after, in the next two, a board call with Phil, because there is this social impact kind of program that you all are talking about putting out to corporations, which may address kind of what Jackie's talking about, and in terms of positioning FIT at this moment. So that's just a thought.
Yeah.
Could I also suggest that we move on? We have a lot to get done today. I don't want to lose everybody's attention. Is there anyone else who wants to?
Joan has her hand up. Someone needs to go on mute besides. Anyone who's not speaking, please go on mute.
I will be quick. Before we go on to the next one, I'd like to be on that committee because in the 80s, I created Minority Intern Fellowship Program for Columbia Business School. And it was very, very simple. They funded a student for both years. So that was a scholarship, but they were also obligated to hire that student and pay them in the summer. Most likely, when you hire an intern, you're going to keep that intern and put that intern on permanently. It's a very smart way and very simple and very straightforward. And so I'd like to be on that committee because I raised hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars and opened inroads. And a company can choose to have more than one in more than one division.
That's a great idea.
Great, wonderful.
So
If I just really quickly, I think this is all great and wonderful. And when we go out to these companies, I think we should, or to individuals, we should encourage them to undertake a commitment to stewardship, because a lot of these people are happy to give some dollars, but actually sitting down with a student, a couple of times a year to help them, figure out their career path and maybe actually introduce them to opportunities would be a huge plus and accomplish much of what has been said here today. So, yeah.
Mentoring,
and stewardship, yeah.
That's what Jay and Patty Baker did, right? I mean, they actually gave scholarships, met with the kids, et cetera, which is pretty powerful.
They continue to do. They have dinners with them at least once a semester. So, and know their families and are involved with them.
Yeah. If there's no other comment, can we ask Sherry? By the way, the agenda is wrong. There is no audit committee report. So we're going to go to the treasurer's report. Sherry, I haven't seen you, or I assume Sherry's on the call.
Yeah, she's on
here.
Thank you.
Very good. And I think, Richard, I believe you're prepared to present the see the presentation.
Yep, that should be on everyone's screen now.
Okay. As you know, Dr. Brown has already provided a very good overview of what the budget scenario is in a broad sense. We are in the position of not yet knowing exactly what the public funding that FIT receives is going to be. You all have seen the newspaper reports that we have seen. The governor a month or so ago suggesting that cuts to education might be as high as 50%. And the mayor of the city of New York saying that the budget shortfall for New York City, I think his executive budget projected is $7 billion with a B dollar shortfall. And I believe the independent budget office says that they believe that the shortfall is even higher. And so it's in that scenario without any specific information from either our two large public funders that we have had to develop a budget for this year. Earlier in the year, in accordance with guidance from SUNY, we did develop scenarios that Dr. Brown described in her presentation. The worst, the bad, and the medium, A, B, and C. I called them because the adjectives just didn't seem to be enough. And so what we are presenting to you is the middle path. We will definitely be, if we find ourselves in a different position over the summer after the fiscal year begins, or whenever that happens, we will be reporting back to you, and we'll have to do additional planning on the campus to accommodate whatever kinds of reductions we receive. So the presentation that is on the screen, Richard, if you would just move to the next page, is, it's we'll go quickly through 21 slides. I know there's a lot on the agenda. It basically will provide an overview of what has happened on the campus and the financial impact of COVID-19 thus far this year. We'll do just give you a snapshot, an overview of the operating budget. Then we will look at revenue, then we will look at expenses, and then we'll conclude the presentation again with another snapshot. Moving on to the next slide. Impact of COVID-19. These are just, this does not go in any great detail, but we wanted to just make sure that we summarize what the president has already stated herself, what some of the financial implications of some of the things that we've had to do this year to accommodate COVID-19. I think that you have already heard that on the financial side, we've been developing scenarios. We are basing the FY21 budget presentation on the second or the medium scenario. We have also been engaged in tracking expenses and revenue losses. We report on a weekly basis to SUNY, who reports to the State Division of Budget, what our costs have been. And so we are keeping close track of that. Should there be an opportunity to recover some of those losses, either through FEMA or through some other sort of federal funding. We have no guarantees that that will happen, but we are tracking the losses in case that were to be the case. In terms of enrollment, there is some uncertainty in enrollment. We have two signals. We got immediate and positive responses to our admissions letters, the letters that we sent to students saying that they've been accepted at FIT. Students seemed eager to come to FIT. They made their deposits quickly. And we still are showing fairly strong enrollment considering the environment that we are living in. In places where there's been weakness, the Office of Enrollment Management and Student Success, through their Vice President, Catherine O'Rourke, has been reaching out to targeted groups of people to see if they can encourage folks who may have not registered for the fall or who may not have turned in their deposits to do so. So we have a very focused and very intensive outreach to try to maximize enrollment as best we can. What you will see, however, in this presentation, and in light of what other SUNY campuses are indicating, and in light, frankly, of what we're reading in the newspapers and what we're seeing in the other higher education publications, this budget projects an enrollment decline of 5%. We will not know until we get closer to the fall semester if that is a good projection or if it is going to need to be revised. Obviously, COVID-19 had a significant impact on students. They migrated this spring to online classes. The faculty just, the word that I've been hearing a lot in all the meetings that I go to is pivot, because we never know what we're going to find out about this pandemic the next day. And people did that. You will remember in the middle of March, there was a big pivot at the college, and we moved directly to online instruction. And it really is kudos to students and faculty and staff for making that kind of adjustment so quickly. Faculty and staff, as I just noticed, have really stepped up and have made major changes in the way they are doing their work and in the way they are continuing the business of the college. Residence hall budget, you saw at our board meeting in April. We are still holding out the scenarios of reduced occupancy. This is a case also where we've had strong signals from students that they're interested in coming to FIT. We actually have a waiting list for the residence halls. However, we know that with social distancing, we may find ourselves in a position of having to reduce the occupancy in the residence halls, but we are not, without additional information about what the fall will look like, we're not really ready yet to make some final decisions about this. So this is something that we are still planning, talking about, and we will have more information to report to you after the beginning of the fiscal year. And then I think, as many of you know, in addition to the Student Housing Corporation, which is of course the residence halls, the foundation also had to make some significant adjustments in its revenue The pandemic has had a major impact. We weren't able to do the gala, which is a major fundraising event. But the advancement team and President Brown have, looked for other opportunities. And one of the biggest successes, of course, was the raising of funds for the Student Emergency Fund. So we've found other ways to advance development. So moving back to the operating budget, if we move on to the next slide, this is the summary of the budget, as you will be seeing more details of in just a moment. You will see the columns from left to right, how we ended at fiscal year 2019. One of the things that we report to you when we do our operating budget in the spring is always to give you a sense of where we are with really reserve funds or unrestricted net assets, dollars that we have access to should there ever be in the position of having to draw on those to balance the budget. And we have in recent years had to draw on those funds. You will see in fiscal year 19, I just want to explain the negative 26 or almost $27 million that is here. When we report to SUNY, we report the $48 million. The $26 million are expenses that FIT has actually incurred for improvements in our physical plant. And so the dollars have been spent, but on the financial statements, they show as an investment. They have been capitalized. So when we want to look at the cash that we actually have available, the rainy day fund, if you will, the reserve fund, the $21 million is the more accurate number for us to look at. So moving on to 2020, if you follow the line that is in yellow, you will see that in the budget that we've approved assumed a shortfall in 2020 or a draw on unrestricted net assets of almost $9 million. We are at this point in time projecting that we will do better, significantly better than that we will actually have a surplus at the end of FY 2020. This is due to a couple of things. You will recall that last year we had engaged in significant belt tightening at FIT. We had a hiring hiatus and we had been watching very carefully the hiring of personnel. The plan was for every 2 vacancies, we would only hire 1. That has yielded for us significant savings, even greater savings than we had projected. So the savings in personnel, of course, also generate savings in fringe benefits. And so a significant amount of the savings are there. In addition, in the spring, there are many things that we were not able to do because of COVID-19 that would have resulted in expenditures in non-personnel dollars, OTPS dollars. And so as a consequence of both of those things, we are ending the year, we are projecting at this point to end the year with a surplus. However, that surplus will be, we expect, very much needed in subsequent years, particularly with some of the news that is coming from other places about what's going to be happening to the operating budget. I will also just mention to you, then let's look at 2021. So 2021, you will see that the revenue that we are projecting is actually less overall than in fiscal year 2020, almost to the level or a little bit below the level that our revenue was in 2020, in fiscal year 2019. 2021, almost equal to what it was in 2019. And our expenses, the same. We are showing expenses slightly higher than we had in 2019, but significantly lower than we budgeted in fiscal year 2020. Even with those, or as a consequence of those 2 changes, the shortfall that we are projecting for fiscal year 2021 is more than $8 million. And if we were to try to use that shortfall against unrestricted net assets, our unrestricted net asset amount would fall to $18 million. That is about 8% of our operating budget. That means that if we were to have to survive on our reserves, we would only last for a month and a quarter. So this is truly, in terms of unrestricted net assets, I believe an untenable position. So we are going to have to take a very serious look at the FY 2021 budget as we have additional information from the city and from the state. So moving on to look at the additional details, the next page basically summarizes the highlights of the revenue. I think I've explained many of these things already. Our President Brown did in her remarks. First of all, Richard, please move to the next slide. Thank you. So you will see that enrollment, the 5% decrease that I mentioned. So our enrollment, we are, for budgeting purposes, moving from the current year enrollment of 8,431 to 8,010 FTEs. New York City, in this budget, assumes a reduction of 5% from New York City. Even though the numbers that they are projecting as their shortfall are higher than this, we think that 5% from the city is probably a safe number at this point, and as I said before, a medium number in terms of projecting our revenue from the city. New York State, we are assuming a 10% cut. One of the scenarios that SUNY had projected, they had advised us to think about a 10% cut. They also suggested that we look at 25%, and as I said before, the governor, in some of his remarks, had referenced to 50%. So we think 10% is probably likely, but it could be a little bit higher, as I mentioned before. County chargebacks, right now, we are assuming that there will be a slight decline in county chargebacks as a consequence of the enrollment decline. Our rate, however, is probably not going to change dramatically. Our biggest risk with regard to county chargebacks is, will the local county governments be able and willing to pay the chargebacks? As those governments undergo greater pressure if they receive reductions from the state of New York, we're not really sure what's going to happen there. This budget does not show a scenario of the counties not paying their chargebacks. Tuition, as President Brown indicated, we're recommending an increase in tuition of $50 a semester for both lower division and upper division resident students, and for a $100 total increase for the calendar year, for the academic year. You're recommending no increase in student fees. You may recall that this year, at the end of March, we decided, because students had left the campus, we did decide, with the wonderful support and help of Sally Haas and the Student Government Association, we were able to refund some of the fees to students for this past year. Continuing education, we're projecting a steady state at the 2020 enrollment levels, and interest income and other revenues, we're also projecting a steady state. So when you look at all of the revenue, please go to the next slide, Richard. You will see a decrease overall from fiscal year 2020, from the current fiscal year, in revenue of about 3%. Moving to the next slide. This is a pie chart representation of the revenues that we're projecting for fiscal year 2021. As you know, in the past, as a share of total revenue, tuition and fees is the biggest share of our revenue, followed by New York City, and by county chargebacks is the next, and then the state being the smallest public funder of the college's budget. Moving to the next slide, these are the dollars on tuition. The column that is in yellow shows what tuition would be raised to, and these are annual rates. So we are proposing a lower division tuition of $5,290 or $2,645 a semester. For non-resident students, as President Brown reported, it is 3 times the resident tuition. And all of the other rates are adjusted in accordance with that. We have a slightly higher rate for upper division, and we parallel the SUNY state-operated campuses in terms of our upper division tuition, and the same thing with our graduate tuition. We're not raising graduate tuition because we are slightly ahead of the SUNY state-operated campuses, and so we're keeping it consistent so that we can come in line with the SUNY state-operated campuses. Moving to the next slide. You've seen this slide before, or we usually show it every spring for us to remember what the incredible value that FIT is as an education. So we compare ourselves to some of the other design schools, Rhode Island School of Design, Parsons, School of Visual Arts in the city, Savannah College of Art and Design. And even at the upper division rate, you will see that these are very we're very competitive, and we do maintain our value even with a $100 increase. The next table is a little bit dense. Richard, if you could move to that, but you will see the yellow line. It shows us basically where we stand in terms of our lower division tuition rate within the SUNY community colleges. And right now, this is in the current fiscal year, we're ranked fourth, with the fourth highest tuition rate among the SUNY community colleges. We do not know at this point what the other SUNY community colleges are going to do in terms of raising tuition. However, we expect that we will stay in this position. We may even drop a little bit lower because many of the other community colleges, as President Brown mentioned, are under far more fiscal pressure. Even though we feel it's pretty severe here at FIT, they're under more pressure than we are financially. They may have to turn to tuition to address those issues. Moving to the next slide, this is the fee schedule. You will see that we are proposing no changes for fiscal year 2021. Moving to the next slide, these are the additional fees. These are the incidental fees. There is an incident that happens or something happens is the reason that you will charge this fee. You either ask for a duplicate diploma or late registration, those kinds of things. These fees also we're recommending that stay the same. The next slide is a graphic representation of what we see potentially happening in terms of state aid funding at the community colleges. A 10% increase would be a almost $300, I said increase, I meant decrease. 10% decrease would mean almost a $300 decrease in base aid per FTE. And that you will see taking it to basically the state providing $2,652 per FTE if there's a 10% increase. Obviously, decrease. Obviously, if the decrease is more than that, that's something we will have to adjust for. The next slide shows is a line graph of all sources of revenue. The blue line at the top is tuition and fees. The red line is this contribution from the City of New York, which you will see is pretty much steady from year to year. Usually, historically, the City of New York has never provided increases for FIT, except when we have a collective bargaining agreement. The purple line actually is the county chargeback amount, and you will see graphically that the counties of the state of New York provide more revenue to FIT than does the state of New York itself. Next slide. This shows what has happened recently in our full-time equivalent students. As President Brown mentioned, our decrease in enrollment has largely been as a consequence of our adult non-matriculated students, the decline in their enrollment. But the 5% decrease from 8,431 to 8,010 is what you see on this graph. The next slide provides a geographic distribution of students. In summary, there are about 40% of our students, 39% that are out of New York State, and the other 60% or 61% are within New York State, between the city and the New York State counties. In terms of enrollment, this may be a factor. We may be somewhat more vulnerable with some of the out-of-state and international students. However, to the extent that we are able to either simultaneously or in other ways provide some sort of remote instruction, we may be able to hold on to some of that enrollment. Moving to the next slide, which starts talking about expenses. So SUNY has imposed on all of its colleges, including FIT, a very, very strict spending controls. We have been instructed not to hire additional personnel or to replace or refill positions unless the position is related to health and safety, or if it is student facing and there is revenue generation as the cause of that position. So whereas in the last 2 years we've had at FIT a hiring hiatus, and our position has been to hire 1 of every 2 vacant positions, we expect that what this will mean is that we will hire something more like 1 of every 8 vacant positions. And so the expectation is that this will be a way to generate some savings in difficult budget times. The budget itself has all vacant positions as being unfunded. So any positions that go into the fiscal year as vacant will remain vacant. Employee step increases are funded in the budget that you see in front of you. Fringe benefits, the rate is 45.4%, and we have budgeted fringe benefits basically at the same level that it was in the current year. This is because it's very difficult for us to project whether the increases in health insurance are we're concerned that those will offset any savings that we have as a consequence of positions not being refilled. So we felt like the more conservative and the more appropriate way to budget would be to straight line fringe benefits. Other than personnel services, we are doing an across the board 5% reduction in OTPS from the budgeted FY 2020 OTPS levels. Moving on to the next page is just a summary of expenses. So you saw on the page that summarized revenue that we're seeing a decline in revenue of 3%. We have budgeted for a similar decline, a 3% decline in expenses from fiscal year 2020. Here is the pie, the next chart. I'm sorry, Richard, I didn't tell you. Yes, thank you. Here is the next chart that is basically a pie graph of where all of our money goes. As you will see that most of our expenses are in personnel when you include fringe benefits and the direct personnel services. I will also remind you that contractual labor is also personnel, so that's another 8% of our cost. Contractual labor are our public safety officers and our buildings and grounds team. Moving to the next slide, this is a representation of our expenses by function, academic affairs, student services, administrative, and as you see, fringe benefits, we have kept those rather than allocating them to the functional areas. So that is the budget. Once again, the snapshot that you saw at the very beginning, which is that we're recommending a budget that is a deficit budget, an $8 million shortfall. We also are recommending this cautiously, understanding that the scenarios may change in the coming days, and we will need to be working on those when we get additional information from both the state and the city. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sherry. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, Liz, I have a question for you, Sherry. And I'm sure you touched on this a little bit, but if you could drill down, what is your most major concern right now? We understand we're in two pandemics.
I'm sorry, Beverly, I did not hear that. It may be me.
You're breaking up, Beverly.
Okay, can you hear me clearly now?
Yes.
Okay, I understand that you covered a lot, and you may have covered this point, but given that we have the two pandemics, how and what do you see is the most major concern for 2021?
So let me just repeat the question to make sure I heard it correctly. You asked what is the most major financial concern for 2021?
Yes.
So I think our biggest financial concern is lost revenue, because every source of revenue is going to be impacted by the pandemic, whether it is the state or the city or the county governments and the funding they provide to us, or whether it is our students and their ability to be able to come on to college, or their willingness to come to New York and their willingness to come onto the campus. All of those things, our future will be determined by what that revenue is, our fiscal year 2021 at least.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Sherry? Thank you, Sherry, very much. We now turn towards the first action item, the business session, which is the elections. And before I turn this over to Stephen, who is going to conduct the elections, I want to say you all are aware, I think, that I am stepping down as chair of the board. And this is, I just want to say it's been a tremendous honor and privilege to serve as chairman of this board. I think Jay Baker, when he last addressed the board, made a very strong case for term limits and for people holding any post really for a limited period of time. And I took that to heart. I think that, you know, everyone sort of has ideas and initiatives they want to carry forward. And then it's time for someone else. So anyway, I also have a second grandchild about to arrive, and my daughter is very eager to have me more. Great. So anyway, thank you to Joyce. I've enjoyed working with you as in this position. I'm always impressed by what you and your cabinet have done. I'm always impressed by the mission of FIT, totally on board with that. And of course, the great news is that we have such wonderful people to step in and take over. Also, I just want to say to the board, I've really enjoyed working with all of you. You know, it's a terrific group, lots of energy, lots of good ideas, and I intend to stay on the board. So I look forward to further spending time with all of you. Anyway, Stephen, without further ado, it's yours.
But Stephen, if I could just say one thing, I just really have to say thank you to Liz. Who would have thought it's been 8 years. I mean, that's amazing how the time has flown, but Liz has just been, you know, creative and thoughtful and dedicated to furthering the mission and helping to move programs, to bring new people into the fold. So you've really made an incredible contribution. So, and I'm very, very grateful. And I'm also very grateful that you're staying on the board, because you obviously have many ideas and a flock that with each new idea you can bring into our fold. So I really just wanted to say thank you publicly. I'm sorry we are all dispersed, so we can't really do this properly. We certainly want you to have your gavel, which is sort of what we pass along each time. But I look forward to the day when we can have a proper recognition and celebration of all you've contributed to the college. So thank you again.
I appreciate that. And I love my gavel. So I'm glad I get to take it. Definitely. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Stephen, you're up here.
So Stephen.
What happened to Stephen?
Oh dear.
Uh-oh, the whole
Stephen forgot to turn his mute off. And I'm going to ask everybody to turn their mutes on unless you're going to be addressing the board at this point. There's a lot of or some type of static in the background.
There is.
But Liz, thank you. And I just want to add my personal appreciation. It's been a pleasure and a privilege working with you over the past 8 years. That's almost the same time I've been here. So let me just get that said, and let me go on with the first election. It's now time to elect the board's chair to serve for the upcoming board year. The board will act separately on nominations for each of the positions of chair and vice chair. Since these elections are being conducted remotely, we will have to do things slightly differently from our customary procedure. Ordinarily, those nominated for either of the two offices would be asked to step out of the boardroom prior to the vote in order to allow other trustees an opportunity to freely and openly discuss the candidates. Today, what we will do with the assistance of our technician, Rick, is move the candidates from our conference room to a separate room electronically, meaning the candidates will be temporarily transferred into a separate conference area. They will be unable to see or hear what is taking place in our main conference room, and then the technician will return the candidates to the main conference room once discussions have been completed and voting by the trustees have concluded. So with that, I now open the floor for nominations for the office of Chair of the Board of Trustees for the upcoming year. May I have a nomination, please?
I'd like to nominate Robin Burns for the chair.
Thank you, Deirdre. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay, at this time I ask that Rick, if you would redirect a connection for Robin to an isolated conference room while the election process continues.
Okay, that's done now.
Thank you. Any additional nominations for the chair? All right. Now open for discussion on Robin's to offer any comments. Is needed for all those in favor of the election of Robin to serve as chair of the board for the 2021 board year to indicate so vote hands.
Aye.
Those aye. Okay. We will now ask our newly elected chair to return to the boardroom.
Is Robin back?
Yes, she is now.
Hello?
Congratulations, Robin. You've been elected as the
Oh.
board's new chair. Your term of office will commence on July 1st and will expire on June 30th, 2021.
Well done.
Thank you, Robin.
So
Okay,
I
with
think
that
now
election-
sorry.
I'm sorry, Liz. With that election concluded, I'm going to turn the election process back to you and allow you to continue elections in today's meeting.
Okie doke. We'll now proceed with the election of the board's vice chair to serve for the coming academic year. As with the election of chair, all nominees for this office will be temporarily transferred into the invisible conference area. So with that said, I now open the floor for nominations to the office of vice chair.
You're muted, Judy.
Jackie. Is there a nomination?
Yes, I would like to nominate my colleague, my dear friend and colleague, Jackie Lividini, to the office of Vice Chair of the FIT Board.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
At this time, I ask that the technician redirect the connection of Jackie Lividini to an isolated conference room while the election process continues. And let me know when that's done.
Okay, that move's complete now.
Thank you. Are there any additional nominations? Any discussion? All in favor of Jackie Lividini's election to vice chairman, please raise your virtual hands. Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you so much. And Jackie can be put back into our group, please, Mr. Technician.
Should be rejoining now.
Jackie, congratulations. You are now elected as vice chair.
Thank you. I'm honored. I'm honored. Thank you.
Oh dear,
We
I've
are
lost
honored. I think those, you know, that just couldn't be a greater selection and election. So thank you, everybody. We now have action items. And I would, as usual, ask that we, I will go through the action items and then I will ask for a motion to approve all of them at the same time after there's discussion on any that require that. The first is the approval of the minutes from the meeting that was held on April 16th. If you all have that.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to do all these at one time. Secondly, we have certificates of permanent tenure to approve, and I'd like to read those names, please. Sandra Coleman, Asa Egasavir, Youngmin Yang, Lisa Kesselman, Alexandrino Furton, Heather Gates McGee, Shadi Ibrahim, Sammy Lee, Richard Maria, David Meyerson, Alexandra Nazarov, Julia Salerni, Scott Schwartz, Marissa Stefani, Christine Taps, Kelvin Van, Marco Viteri, Yiwen Wang, Wong, excuse me. Okie doke, hold on one second. Sorry about this. We will be approving the tuition and student fee changes that Sherry talked about in her presentation and the operating budget for fiscal year 2021. And last but not least, we have also in your packet of information the schedule for upcoming board meetings, 4 of them in the coming year. So would anyone like to have questions or commentary about any of these issues? Sorry, I just dropped everything. Then I will if not, I will entertain a motion to approve all of those items simultaneously.
So moved.
Could I have a second?
You're muted, Beverly.
Someone want a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'll vote in favor of all 5 action items. All hands up. Yes. Any opposed? Feel free to unmute yourself if you're opposed. Okay, I think we have approved all of those action items. And so now, other than anyone have anything further that they'd like to talk about, I will entertain a motion to adjourn, but I'm also open, the floor is open.
Hi, everyone. So I want to make sure we got through all the action items, but I did have a comment with all these initiatives we are doing with these like pipelines and working with companies right now. Something that we've noticed, and we're really excited, the student government's working on a lot of similar initiatives, so I'm excited for the opportunity to partner with many of you moving forward. But something that I want to bring up is a student concern and something that is a struggle for a lot of our students is as we build out a lot of these internships and partnerships, that they can't just be for credit because a lot of our unpaid internships hold inherent privilege. So many of our students can't afford to miss 2 days a week of work and participate in an unpaid internship. So as we develop these programs with these companies, I just ask that if it is for credit, that there is also some form of payment for students' time so that it's accessible for everyone to afford those opportunities.
So that seems like a reasonable idea, but are you suggesting that the school pay for that or companies pay for that? How are you envisioning this working?
So usually with an internship, companies are either paying you an hourly wage or a stipend, or you are working with the internship center on campus to be able to apply for your internship to count as credit. But it usually have to do like 10 to 20 hours a week for that internship. And a lot of students can't participate in credited internships necessarily because they can't give up those days during the week where they normally work a part-time or full-time job. So I guess as we build those out, just making sure a large majority of them offer the stipend or hourly pay.
Yeah. If I could just say, am I on? Yeah. If I could just say, Sally, I think that we do have paid internships, but they're not for credit. And generally, I don't believe you can have both. We can double check that, but I think there are regulations that say you cannot have both. And, you know, obviously for many of the academic programs, the curriculum requires the internship. We often say that we think that's why we have such a high job placement at graduation, because the students have had this experience in the company sees what they can do. They've, you know, absorbed the company culture, etc. So it may well be that it's a curriculum issue as opposed to an internship issue, but we'll have to take a look and see what's
No, absolutely. And I think that we still should hold on to our credit-based programs. Absolutely. I think they've done great things. Just making sure that there's also opportunity for paid internships to ensure that it's accessible for everyone if they don't necessarily need it for their major, but they'd like to advance in their career, but can't afford to give up time during work.
Yeah, and there are for some, but maybe to your point, any new conversations we have could really be geared in that way.
Thank you.
Whoops, sorry. Anybody else have anything they'd like to offer? Joyce, I do think it might be a good idea to have a development-focused meeting or call within the next month to explore more of these issues that came up earlier, and also what Sally just mentioned.
Sure, absolutely. We'll work on that. That'll be good. I hope we have lots to report in a month.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Anyone have anything else? Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Actually, I do have something. Sorry.
Sorry.
Robin?
I just wanted to tell everybody, this Sunday is Joyce's 20th year anniversary with FIT.
Oh my God.
I feel I don't know, my hair is so long now. I was looking for gray hair. It's not hard to find after this many weeks. But I know that if we were in person, we would be able to do this, as you said, the proper way, which we can't do. But I just wanted to say, and I'm sure you all feel the same way, that we have great appreciation for 20 years of leadership and vision and professionalism, and for truly elevating FIT from where it was 20 years ago. And I was on the board 20 years ago. And for those of you who weren't, you have no idea how far we have come under her tutelage. And it's also been not only hard work for you and a lot of people, but it's also been a great pleasure to be a part of it and to see it. So congratulations for 20 years.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. That was very nice. I appreciate that.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. You know, when we all get back together, we'll have celebration after celebration. Let's just, you know.
We'll just party.
And you know, who knows? Maybe we'll be building a building at the same time. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All right, all in favor. And again, thank you everybody for being here, being involved, all that everybody does. It's fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Congratulations.